Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Amazing Outdoors. This podcast is being presented by Upland Outfitters, home of the Relentless pants, man. Those things are awesome. I had them out this week, and I pretty much, since I started the partnership with Jason, have been wearing those pants out anytime over the summer here where I had to do any work at the farm or dog training. I've even had them on the boat a little bit. They are tough as nails. I have yet to see a pull 'em thread. I've been in some nasty briars. They really held up a lot better than I thought. I can't recommend them enough. Hunting season is around the corner. Make sure you use discount code AMAZING, and I believe Jason is still offering 20% off on the Relentless pants. So pick up a pair before hunting season is upon us, and you're out in the woods with a ripped up pair of pants and sweating, unnecessarily, because Jason's pants and the Relentless pants are top notch and breathable, light. So you're going to want them this early season. Make sure you get them now. I also have a quick announcement. We've got another kind of temporary partnership with Chippewa River Custom Rods. Tom is going to be offering 10% off with discount code AMAZING10. AMAZING10. And it's all caps. If you decide to call him for a custom rod, just make sure you tell him that you heard about custom rods on Amazing Outdoors podcast, and he will make sure that you get hooked up with a discount. All that information for both sponsors and partners are going to be in the show notes, so please support the podcast and these great companies. They are really good partners for the podcast, and I would like to see our listeners support them as well. So look them up, Uplnd Outfitters and Chippewa River Custom Rods. Enjoy today's show.
Welcome to Amazing Outdoors. On this podcast, you will hear about our adventures chasing all kinds of different game here in the heartland of America. We live and breathe outdoors. We hunt, we fish, and we absolutely love being outside. It is not just a passion, it is a way of life.
Episode 6. Thanks everyone for coming back for another great conversation here today. We sit down with a couple biologists from Missouri. We discuss land habitat management on my small farm, along with some quail hunting and some other unique hunts that they've done, sage grouse, desert birds, some of the things that I want to get into this fall. If you thought about booking a hunt with us this fall, make sure you stay tuned at the end of the podcast. There's some information we're starting to book up. I wanted to also make some announcements. I'll make this really, really quick. We got a few things in the works. I'm probably going to start a Patreon page, and I'm also going to give a couple tiers for that. And with that Patreon membership, I'm considering giving away 3-day get together for a couple of the listeners. We'll draw out of the hat. Out of everyone, you got to have probably 3 months in to qualify, It'll be at a certain price level. Of course, there'll be other price levels you can help support the podcast and the mission here if you like the content. I really appreciate it. I don't have it all launched yet, but keep an eye out on social media. I have a lot of different scenarios we're working out here, so I'm hoping to really bring some great opportunities for all of you who have kind of bared with some of the beginning of this podcast and have been listening in. We're hoping to really amp up some of the things we have coming here. We're working on possibly a little mini series about some native birds. Also want to kind of pivot a little bit as the seasons come here. We're going to talk a little bit about fishing. I did get out and do some trout fishing the other day. The bugs are starting to hatch. I'm probably going to try to sneak out here relatively soon and bring a little bit of an update and try to get somebody from Trout Unlimited. So if you're listening, Trout Unlimited people, reach out. But enjoy the podcast here today. I sit down with Frank and Kyle. They're Upland Flush on Instagram. There'll be contact information in the show notes. I'm going to hit the roll button. Enjoy. Welcome, gentlemen, to the Amazing Outdoors podcast. Got Kyle and Frank here of Upland Flush on Instagram, and they're both wildlife biologists and specialize in habitat and bobwhite quail. And I'm excited to have you guys on and get into this conversation. So without stealing any thunder, why don't you guys let us know who you are?
All right.
Frank
first.
or Kyle, yeah.
Yeah, I'll go first. I'm Frank Lawn Carriage. I'm a wildlife management biologist in Missouri. I have been a wildlife biologist for 16 years in Missouri, and a year before that in Arkansas. I did some quail research in Kansas prior to that, and then got my master's degree doing prairie chicken research in the Flint Hills of Kansas. My specialty in terms of my professional life is bobwhite quail management and research. Absolutely enthralled with the species. I've spent, the better part of 2 decades working on it. Also have done quite a bit of prairie chicken work, but for the most part, it's bobwhite quail centric.
Yeah, and so I'm Kyle Hedges, and similar background, also wildlife biologist here in Missouri, managing public land, but been here over 20 years, was in Kansas for about 5 years doing the same, public lands management, upland habitat, focused on quail, also been involved in quail research. So our day jobs revolve around quail. Of course, it's good. We do, habitat stuff that's good. Both of us do for turkeys and deer. And, we've got a couple wetlands on our areas. And it's one of those, when you're a wildlife biologist, you're supposed to be a jack of all trades, I guess. But our side jobs, our weekend jobs, we are consultants for Land and Legacy. A consulting company. We go around the country and help people improve habitat, whether it's deer habitat, turkeys, quail, pheasants, little mix of everything. So a couple different hats we wear.
It sounds like a fantastically fun job. I mean, I'm envious. I spent the better part of my life sitting behind a desk and out on the street talking about electronics. So I'd rather be in the field working. So you guys, we got connected on Instagram, and I, a few years ago, got exposed to bobwhite quail, and I've just kind of fallen in love myself ever since. It's one of the most impressive and adrenaline rush kind of experiences I think you can have carrying around a shotgun, watching your dog point and trying to pick out one bird out of 20, 25 birds, for a guy that shoots grouse all the time up north, it still is a challenge every year that I go down to Kansas and try to get on one bird. It takes me a good day to get back into the swing of things.
Yep.
So,
that's the thing is we both grew up quail hunters. We are kind of in that generation where our fathers were both avid bird hunters. That's what I know Kyle and I have talked about this a lot. That's what our fathers did. Deer hunting was not a big thing to our fathers. So it was bird hunting in the fall, and we were dragged along at young ages, and that's just what we knew. And so it was kind of a natural fit. Our career paths followed this bird because we were so intertwined with it, I guess. I grew up with it as a young age. Kyle in Kansas and me in Southwest Missouri, where we had still decent bird numbers, where it was easy. In terms of my experience, it was easy to fall in love with bird hunting, especially bobwhite quail, because there was birds around and it was a lot of fun. And so our careers being a natural follow that we were hunters first, and then built our careers on that.
Yeah. Now, Frank, did you, obviously both of you guys had a ball and fell in love with these birds at a young age. But what drove you guys was there a call to action? Now, I look back at history, and the bobwhite quail have had a major habitat loss in the last 50 years. And it's starting to come back, finally, is kind of what I'm hearing and seeing, at least in Kansas. But was there kind of a call to action that led you guys down this path for a career? Did you guys experience kind of some of the downfall of the bobwhite quail numbers in Missouri growing up?
Yeah. For me, it was just, I just love, I wanted a career in the outdoors. I wanted a career doing something with wildlife management and game birds. I did prey chickens when I was in grad school, and I, of course, grew up hunting game birds, quail and pheasant in Missouri and Kansas. And I just love the whole game bird. Just all of the species of game birds just are so fascinating. And so it was it wasn't necessarily a call to action to see the bobwhites were declining, though I can say that the last, probably decade of our careers has been dedicated to that. But it was more just being enthralled with upland game birds as a guild more than anything.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up kind of the opposite of you guys with at least what my father enjoyed doing. It was fishing and deer hunting is what we did. And it wasn't until my daughter was begging me for a Christmas puppy one year, and I'm going to get a dog that's going to work. And the dog kind of got me introduced, and then introduced to friends, and I got into bird hunting later in life. But I've only been personally doing bird hunting for the better part of 6-7 seasons now, and I've noticed a decline in certain areas and then a boom in other areas. And I watched, growing up, deer hunting, the progression of agriculture and drain tiling and stuff, and it never really correlated to me the impact until I started bird hunting and taking a little bit more notice in things, and specifically, how sensitive kind of bobwhite quail were to different weather patterns and that agricultural change as well. This has always been kind of fascinating. It's really why I reached out to you guys. And so being in Missouri, I think I called on Kyle or Frank last time. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. But how's Missouri's population doing for bobwhite? I drive through the north west corner every year heading to Kansas, but don't stop. And so I was kind of curious.
Well, so this is Kyle, and we're like most states. I mean, from here to Florida, we've seen the decline for the last 40 years, unfortunately. What you'll find, and there's a variety of reasons. That can be its whole own podcast. It's an endless list, but it all comes down to habitat loss. It's just a variety of ways. But
yeah, there's so many variables that it's hard. Yeah, we could go on forever about it.
Yeah. So what you see in Missouri in particular, though, is overall statewide decline continues. 2 or 3% a year. On public land, some of our public land is more stabilized. It's not going to say it's a great bird population, but that we have some more stable populations, on a jumping ahead here. But, if Frank and I go out, and of course we know the better spots to go on the public stuff, but, we can put together a 6 covey day down here. So, I mean, they're on public land. We can hold our own on public land, but that's because there's no holds barred and we can manage it to the hilt for quail, right?
Well, and just the amount of boot tracks that you put on the ground each season helps out too.
Right. You see in Kansas, let me just throw you a compare and contrast here. The boom that's kind of happened in the last few years in Kansas, a lot of that's on private land. And that's a byproduct. That's not, and I'm not taking anything away from Kansas landowners, but it's not because there's been this huge landowner effort. There's some people doing some stuff, don't get me wrong, but it's not been this huge concerted effort of, hey, we want more quail and we're doing all this habitat work. It's just been the right combination of weather. Some things have played out right. And those quail have become a byproduct of the farming operations over there. And here, Missouri's real heavy. North Missouri's ag, but the bottom half of Missouri is real heavy cow-calf country, which is fescue dominated. And it doesn't matter how you manage that kind of operation, quail will never be much of a byproduct of that, regardless of good weather, bad weather. So it's just kind of what the commodities are here, and that's not the most favorable for quail.
Yeah, just kind of random question, but if a guy like me was heading down to Missouri, what part of the state, like if you were to divide it in 4 sections, do guys focus on the most?
So Kyle and I are both in the southwest portion, so south of Kansas City, and west of Springfield.
Sure.
The southwest sort of fourth of it. And, we've got some native grasslands, which, we can talk about, down the road, but that's showing to be those native stable grassland landscapes tend to have more stable quail populations. And then, but in terms of hunting, North Missouri is sort of that, and the dynamic up there is CRP plays such a big role up there, conservation reserve program, and the addition of grass and wildflower plantings in an agricultural landscape. It's much more prevalent in north half of the state than in the south half because there's more grain crops in the north half. And so bird populations tend to be higher up there on an annual basis. Now, they can also plummet pretty quickly because of commodity prices or because of weather or because of a bad winter event, which I'm a little bit nervous going forward this year because there was some significant winter weather.
I know.
So they can see really high annual variation. Our populations tend not to, at least in the Southwest, tend not to see those wild swings. But so that's sort of the dynamic we're working with.
Yeah, how I think Kansas hit -20 for an extended period of time. I know it was 2 weeks up here that we were below zero. How does that affect quail and Bob White specifically? They're not made for that kind of weather typically.
Yeah, so you see some loss. Yeah,
they're wild.
That's exactly right. They're tougher than we give them credit for. I'm always amazed at what birds can live through. We had the study that Frank referred to, the biggest. We were a part of a big research study in Missouri. Maybe that was pre-show. I don't remember. But anyway, we went through different weather patterns. That was a 5-year study. No, it didn't have anything as severe as this negative temperature garbage that we had for whenever that was, a month ago. But certainly you suffer some loss. What you find out, though, real quick, 1, they're tougher than you think. And 2, in the quality habitat, you don't suffer near as much loss. The marginal habitat, the fringes, the birds that are living in questionable places, that's when you see coveys blink out. The guy that's down to one covey on his place and they only live around this old little broken down homestead, and that's, they've got a quarter acre of habitat and that covey's been hanging on. That's the last covey and they've been there for 3 years. That's when those coveys blink out. So, certainly see some mortality. We can't put a percentage on it. I don't know we didn't have any radio collared birds going on during this cold spell, so I don't know how bad it would have been. I would suspect it wouldn't be near as severe as you would fear, though.
Yeah. So what gets them more than the cold would be an extended period of ice and snow, especially ice and then snow. If it's snow, they can, you can get some windswept areas that they can scratch around and get some food. But if they can't eat for a few days, then they start to suffer some physiological damage, and may not kill them, but it makes them much more susceptible to predation, and yada yada. Down the whole chain goes on. So we didn't really have that down here, but I heard some stories about North Missouri that had me a little bit concerned, maybe about some extended snow and ice on the ground. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, you Southern boys, you don't have anything to worry about,
No.
We had the white stuff for like 6 months sometimes up here.
Oh gosh. Oh yeah, no, yeah.
It's been really nice this spring so far, and I've been able to get my dogs out, and even after all that cold weather we had up here, I've been seeing what I would consider good grouse numbers in marginal habitat that it surprised me. So. Anything that's wild and untamed, it's got to will to survive. I mean, people don't understand that that's their job. That's what they do for a living. And when you go spend a little bit of time out in the field, that's their bedroom. I mean, that's their living room. That's where they spend their time. And, so we think as hunters that, we go out a few times and we learn a lot, but the birds and nature itself surprises you every time if you're willing to look for it.
Oh, you bet. Yep.
So, we could kind of save a little bit of maybe talk a little bit about Kansas your last season. We can talk that a little bit later when we get into a couple other different trips that you guys did. But one of the big topics I wanted to kind of chat with you guys about, I'm in northwest Wisconsin. I bought some land, not a lot, 32 acres. The reason I bought it, my wife and I are trying to get out of the city. We've kind of reached the end of our rope here, and our time is expired, and it's time for that next chapter. The kids are moving out, and it's time to get into the country where we always wanted to be. But I've got a very diverse little 32 acres, or big 32 acres, as I like to think about it. And it's basically we have 15-ish acres of old growth pasture. Well, not old growth. That's what I want to do with it. It was hayed a couple of years ago, it looks like. And then we've got a stand of oaks and a stand of aspen, and there is a cattail swamp about a third of the woods, so it breaks up between the two stands of woods. And guy like me, there's a decent pheasant population in the area, and there's been actually a lot of habitat work done by the state and the federal government for waterfowl production areas in this area. It's kind of one of the reasons we really liked it. Gave us a lot of opportunities outside our back door, plus in the neighborhood in a sense. And the numbers are good, but I'm looking at this going, I have basically a clean slate to manage, because everything's except for the pasture is timber that needs to be harvested, and there's going to be a process with that. But for the pasture land, what is a guy to do when he has a clean slate like this? It's something that's been worked agriculturally, now is hayed, and he's looking to attract game birds. Frank, you want to give me maybe both of you guys give me a crack at what some of the concepts that I need to start wrapping my head around?
Yeah, so we can both jump into that. So, one of the things that Kyle and I always was talk about when we're talking about game birds is usable space. So, and that's not a concept that we came up with. That's a concept that was developed by Fred Guthrie, who's a famed quail researcher in Oklahoma. And he came up with this concept of usable space. And it's really intuitive that as you increase the space that is quality and usable for the species, then the species should then increase to a point where usable space is maximized. That's about all you can do. And it holds really well for bobwhites. It holds for a host of other game bird species. And one of the things we have to remember is if we're talking, and it depends on the game bird we're talking about. If we're talking about bobwhite quail, they are very early successional. So we're talking about the first 1 to 2.5 to 3 years after some kind of disturbance, depending on where you're at in the country. If you're sort of where we're at, where we get 45 to 50 inches of rain, we have to disturb the ground through mechanical means or prescribed fire or grazing or something to get that type of growth. So we're looking at, we want early successional weeds. So weeds that are ankle to knee high for bobwhite quail, maybe up to thigh high for that screening cover. Heavy on weeds like ragweed and croton and things like that, with some grasses like little bluestem. There has to be a shrub component. Bobwhites have to have shrubs. So we're talking about plum thickets, which I'm sure you're familiar with from your time in Kansas.
Oh, absolutely. We don't really have much of that up here. We get kind of willow thickets and ideally, I'd love to build a place that a guy could think he had quail, but I think the native bobwhite quail that was here is no longer.
I think you're
Wisconsin
too far out of it.
It's hurting. They're there, but you got to go to the southern part of the state. But anyways.
Yeah. So if you think about bobwhites, they exist from the East Coast all the way to eastern Colorado, and then from southern Wisconsin all the way down into Mexico. So across that range, the species of plants that they use are different and vast. And that goes with the same type with the shrubs that they use. So the shrubs that they use in Florida are different shrubs than they use in Texas, but the structure is what's important.
Stem density, right?
The stem density is important. The height of the vegetation, the density of the vegetation is important. And it needs to produce a lot of insects in the summertime for the chicks and the adults. And it needs to produce a lot of seeds in the fall and wintertime to get them through the time when insects are gone, and has to have that shrub component for escape cover and for thermal habitat. But those are, so that's for bobwhite quail. Then we can get into pheasants, which can stand taller grasses and can get by without shrubs for the most part. We can talk about, those are probably the two that most people want to focus on. You start talking about prairie chickens and things like that, and you're getting to vast landscapes. But so that's kind of a starting point. And Kyle, add on to that, please.
Yeah, in your specific case, I mean, you're talking about a specific part of Wisconsin and specific goals. I mean, so if you say you have some pheasants around there, and where would a guy start?
Well, I guess, even back up a little bit, a lot of people over COVID here, I think have decided to get out of the city and they're buying smaller chunks of land that might be biodiverse like this, and they want to kind of do the same thing. So, what are the components? Not necessarily the genus of grass and whatnot, but like Kyle or Frank had said that the shrub component, the grass component. So it's different species around the country, but the components themselves are very similar.
Right. The first thing I would ask, is if you specifically wanted pheasants and you were talking about this field and had been hayed you thought in the last couple years, what's in it? Is it a cool season grass? Probably, if it's that far north. Is it a native? Is it a non-native grass? Some of those things come into play. So right off the bat, if it's something non-native, then I don't want it there. Yeah. It's probably not the best thing. Even though we're talking about pheasants, which are not native, that's one of the rare exceptions that we like a non-native species, right? But
it's a struggle. It's a little bit of a struggle sometimes when you start thinking about prairie chickens and sharp tails, but we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. But so you're looking, and this is going to be good for turkeys in Wisconsin. I know they're blowing up. I don't know if they're blowing up as far north as you are, but parts of Wisconsin
are all
exploding
over.
With turkeys.
We had the girls pointed 2 of them the other day. We had nice big old long beard flush out about 10 yards above my head. Going, man, that'd be a fun, off point.
Yes.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah. So a kind of a field like that, I'm going to want some bunch grasses for nesting if I'm worried about or hoping to have pheasants in it. So some type of structure, a grass, whether it's cool or warm season, I want it to grow in clumps. I don't want a sod forming grass like fescue and brome or sod forming grasses. Don't like.
Sure, makes sense.
You want clumpy stuff so there's bare ground in between. When you're out in Kansas, you're seeing, little blue stem is the main grass that you're probably hunting around.
Yeah,
or
we
in
got
some
a
of the
little
CRP
bit of
fields, it'd
up
be
by us.
big blue.
Okay.
And so then the
as well with some of the habitat work they've done down the road.
Yeah.
So you can see patches of some of this stuff that's coming up in the field, but regardless.
And then you want to divert, and you don't want the grass. A lot of people see that CRP. Oh, look at that. Well, lots of times CRP is just almost all grass. The more important component is the weeds Frank talked about, or forbs. That's not as a disturbing name for people as weeds are, but forbs are just broadleaf plants. They're just weeds. But weeds are good in wildlife management. We want weeds. That's what's going to attract the bugs all summer for turkey poults to eat. Your pheasant chicks are going to eat. And then those are going to produce seeds, like he said. And it also provides that little bit overhead cover. If you've got wild sunflowers out there, ragweed, all different kinds of weeds that these critters can move about. And tell you what, it goes beyond that. Here's the glory of what Frank and I do for a living as managing for quail. Well, if you've got quail on your property, I can assure you have pretty good deer habitat. Just because you have good deer habitat doesn't mean you have quail. Quail are like the umbrella species. So if you can, and pheasants would fit into with that too. If you've got pretty good pheasant habitat, you probably have some decent deer running around. So they're going to eat those forbs. Everybody thinks agricultural crops for deer, right? And, they do grow big deer in Iowa, but over 70% of their diet is not agricultural crops. They're eating herbaceous plants, which is forbs and weeds.
Oh yeah.
So that stuff is critical.
You go into some of these. I looked at a lot of property when I was looking to buy, and some of these old growth forests that are up here, and you can see through a 40-acre parcel because the deer have browsed everything.
Yep.
Head high that they can reach, and then the canopies choked everything else out. So. Yeah, it's
Yep.
that diversity.
We see that all over.
Broadleaf habitat structure is really, really good for all wildlife. We've been lucky. One of the reasons I kind of bought the place, I let the hounds out, and we ended up, moving pointed at one grouse and ran a rooster into the swamp. And I'm going, well, it's got everything. And then every time I've been up there ever since, I closed on this thing last December. So I've been up there a little bit, and I'm seeing everything I want to see there. And it's just, I know it's got the right mix of things. It's just, how do you groom it to be even nicer?
Yep. Well, and I think people need to be realistic, and I'm not picking on you by any means. It sounds like a really cool place, but people need to recognize, what'd you say? It's 32 acres.
It's only 32 acres.
Right. And I know this, but just for the listeners, I think some people go into some of these things a little wearing some rose-colored glasses, and we're not going to have 300 pheasants living on 32 acres. It's just not going to happen, right? I mean,
I was happy to see one grouse.
Right.
And so, I'm never going to kill that grouse.
Right. You're just looking for having the species there, and right. So
well, when you got
we suffer that.
It's bird contacts.
That's right. Yeah. We suffer that in the quail world lots of times because, and my dad falls in this category. My dad's 82 years old. He remembers the good old days. He remembers killing limits of quail with a German Shepherd and a Cocker Spaniel because there was so many quail. I remember the 15 cubby days, but he remembers, better stuff than that. And people get that idea sometimes like, well, if I do this, I can get it back to that. Well, that day may be gone. So setting the realistic expectations based on the acreage, what's around you, guy gets 32 acre piece. It could be the most textbook pheasant habitat in the world. But if it's surrounded by 10,000 acres of, closed canopy timber, well, then it's never going to be the greatest pheasant place in the world. So it's relative to what's around. And
again, 3 years of looking and feeling blessed that I found it. But, I can't think of an area that I know within close proximity to the Twin Cities metro that offers so much diversity.
Awesome.
I mean, so it's really unique. I'm hoping to release some quail, and I'm hoping for, I'd like to see them around. I don't really care to shoot them. We'll have some around in the pen that we can, dog train with, but
yeah,
exactly. I don't know. It's one of those things where you just wish you could do your part a little. And I just enjoy the wildlife, and it being able to see it out your back door is the ideal dream for me. So before we kind of get into more hunting and banter, because I have a feeling it'll go back and forth a little bit.
Sure.
But let's what can us as hunters do to kind of help the conservation effort? I mean, quail forever, pheasants forever, rough grouse, everybody's asking for your money. And I think, it's hard for sometimes people to conceptualize, hey, this money went here and it helped. There's not a direct correlation. So, what can hunters do outside of that, or, maybe find a way to get engaged more at some of those organizations? You guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So here's one of the things I'll mention. People, bird hunters and folks have sort of come to accept that this bobwhite decline is real, and some hunters have just kind of, given up on bobwhites sort of I'm talking about from Missouri east and sort of south, like it's a foregone conclusion. Bobwhites are, we still have them. We still hunt them in places, but man, the glory days, we're never going to see those glory days again. And I'll tell you that can reverberate to decision makers. There needs to be a concerted effort for hunters, conservationists to lobby state agencies to not forget nor give up on bobwhites, to give it more than just lip service, like, yeah, bobwhites are important to us, but really, if we're going to save bobwhites, in terms of a researcher in Texas calls it recreationally extinct, and that means that there's bobwhites around, but recreationally, in terms of hunting them, they're gone. And I've seen that in many of the same counties that I grew up hunting. I can take you to places and probably hear a bobwhite call in the springtime, but I can't take you to places that put together a hunt because recreationally they're extinct. And that is a problem. And
it's a huge problem, man. I mean, and it's beyond bobwhites. I mean, it's prairie chickens, it's sharptails, it's all the native species that are here in North America. And I I don't mean to steal your thunder there, but it's become something that I'm very aware of, and it's become something I'm very passionate about these days.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the jobs that Kyle and I have taken on just by default, I think, is sounding the alarm, at least in our sphere of influence in our state, is sounding the alarm about this problem. This bird has declined over 80%, in some places over 90%, and is declining at the rate, like Kyle said, of 1 to 3% annually. So this is a continual decline, and it's a big problem. And hunters can just, make their voices known to their commissioners, to their state agency folks, to keep bobwhite at least in the forefront, to keep a focus on bobwhite conservation in places where it can be done. So and most states have gone with this targeted approach, which is a good idea. So in places where habitat is suitable, or bobwhite conservation is real and tangible, focus resources there, and that's a good way forward. But I think, other than joining these NGOs, these conservation organizations like Quail Forever, Pheasants Forever, Ruffed Grouse Society, highly encourage that. Those folks are doing good work, and they're employing good people to put conservation on the ground. But just lobbying for bobwhite conservation wherever you can. Anytime you see a wildlife director or a wildlife biologist or whatever, in any kind of situation where you have a chance to lobby, say, hey, let's think about bobwhites. That's a great place to start, because we have to be, if the past has taught us anything, we're going to have to be intentional if we're going to recover bobwhites. It's at least in most of the country, in country where there's still good habitat, like Texas, like West Texas, West Oklahoma, western parts of western Kansas. Sometimes bobwhite populations there are not intentional, like Kyle mentioned, but most of the country, we're going to have to be intentional about
it. It has to be done. And now the species in itself is kind of like the canary in the coal mine. You can't bring those miners back, and I just don't see a change in course and in a loss in habitat to the point where you can't bring the native bobwhite quail back. We can't get it to that point. And it's one of the reasons I started this podcast, is because I just really wanted to make people aware of some of these these native species of birds that are in rapid decline. I mean, rapid decline in some areas. And it needs to be something that, if you're going to go out in the woods and hunt ruffed grouse, you need to join the Ruffed Grouse Society, and you need to know those people and get involved at the chapter in the area that you hunt. Same goes for, like you said, Quail Forever and Pheasants Forever. It's important to be involved, because if you're not involved, I don't want to hear any complaint.
That's right.
There's not any quail or there's not any grouse around. And it's too important to let this slip.
You're right, Brian, too. You mentioned that, it's not just the quail. I mean, grouse are struggling in lots of different places. Frank and I, we've never done the rough grouse deal. Went up and did that a few years ago.
Well, you come up here, I'll show you a real good time. So
yeah, we went and did it. Well, and we had a good hunt, in central Wisconsin. We had some buddies that went up there just, I guess last year, so 3 years later, and just horrible, Well, I mean, bad, struggling around that area, and all the locals saying, "Oh yeah, it's really crashed right here." So this stuff happens for different species all across the country. And it all matters. And what's amazing to us is, especially in the world of bobwhite, how many people talk about, oh yeah, I remember, back in the day, and they just, kind of ran out of birds. So when my last bird dog died, I just hung it up and didn't get another one. Almost like they're, whatever. I mean, can you imagine if 80% of the deer went away, 80% deer decline? People would be screaming from the rooftops.
The
but
insurance
it's like
companies
quail
would love it, but
well, yeah, but it's like bird hunters just take it. Like
Well,
the squeaky wheel gets the grease, you got to go start rattling some chains,
a podcast that I recorded a couple weeks ago was with one of the VPs of the Rough Grouse Society. And he put it to me in a very interesting perspective. And I'm kind of curious what your take is, because you guys have, I would think it's a kind of a similar analogy, in Wisconsin or Minnesota, you got to buy a stamp to hunt pheasants. So people, or ducks for that matter, waterfowl. So people assign a value to it. Like squirrel hunting and grouse hunting and woodcock hunting up here, there's no value assigned to it. It just comes along with your small game license. What's your take on, how the people down by you perceive bobwhite? Because going to Kansas, I kind of perceive it almost in a similar fashion as the rough grouse up here, and the way people treat it from a just casual standpoint.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. There's an article that just came out in Journal of Wildlife Management, which is a scientific journal. So very few people and very few hunters read it because it's a scientific journal. But basically, they were making the argument, why so many waterfowl and why so few bobwhites? And they were making the distinction because, waterfowl were included in the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, so they get lots of federal dollars, lots of federal attention. And they put the analogy, they said, look at Arkansas. If you want to hunt quail in Arkansas, same thing with Missouri. So let's say quail in Missouri. Let's just forget Arkansas. Quail in Missouri, if you're a resident, you buy $11 of small game license. If you want a duck hunt, you buy your $11 small game license, your $7 state duck stamp, your $25 state waterfowl or federal waterfowl stamp. People do it. It's part of doing business. And so they assign more value to it.
Yeah, the covey only gets $11.
Yeah, and that small game
cheap,
license does not go all to quail, believe me. So you're right. So and they were making the argument of, hey, let's start thinking about small game and upland game birds on a waterfowl model, or a model where we're involving. So instead of each state pulling its own way, so Missouri responsible for quail, Arkansas responsible for its quail, Oklahoma responsible for its quail. What about working together in a multi-state or sort of how the waterfowl people do, and then broaching the subject of a federal upland game bird stamp. Now, I don't know that we'll ever get that far, but the point was being made that there's a value assigned to waterfowl that's not assigned to small game, and because of that, there's so much more habitat dollars that go towards waterfowl, and sure, pheasants and prairie chickens and sharptails can benefit from that, but not to the extent that waterfowl do. So people are starting to ask these questions because they see the disparity. And we're at a time in bobwhite conservation where we need to have all these ideas on the table and not reject them out of hand, but at least start thinking about it. So it's interesting that you bring that up, because these conversations are starting to happen.
They are. And I'm, not one to advocate for raising the cost, having, the government raised costs of hunting. I think that cost to entry sometimes is a preventer from other people trying the sport and us growing the community. However, at the same time, there's that conversation that we're having here about being a value assigned to it and the discount that the sportsman potentially takes because there isn't that value assigned like another stamp. It's a tough conversation. I'm not afraid to have it. I don't want to pay more, but I have no problem paying more if that's what's required to save. And as long as I think the hunter sees the direct correlation of, hey, I'm paying a $10 stamp now, and over the course of that 3 years maybe that they're paying that, they're seeing bird numbers come back, or the habitat improved, or projects being done locally, I don't think it'll be an issue. But it's not a conversation that I don't think most hunters want to admit to, spending more for a license to go hunt. So it's a tough conversation, I think, and I hope that it develops into a happy medium where we can grow the community. People aren't rejected because of the cost, and we see habitat improvement and more wildlife species in general. But yeah, we'll see where it goes. I heard with this whole Call of the Uplands thing that PF and QF are doing, that I think, was it 3% of the native bobwhite quail habitat is remaining in the United States today? Is that number?
That sounds about right.
I could believe that.
To me, that was when I heard that, and I had show notes. I had a couple of recordings done. It was like, shift this thing into, downshift to 3 and hit the gas. Because I mean, it was, I referenced it, and I think one of the guys from QF referenced it, but that's on your watch. That's on my watch. It's on all of our watch. Yeah. And that's why the value assigned to it, I think the conversation has to happen, and people have to look at it differently. And I don't know how you make people look at it differently other than ask them to pay a little more or ask them to put some work in, because until they, have skin in the game, we're probably going to see the same old politics around these types of subjects.
Yep. And I think the waterfowl is a good example. In defense of, those extra funds, they did put the habitat in. They did make a difference. And we now I remember shooting, 100-point system on ducks, and the Drake Mallard was 50 points. You're going out slogging through the mud, doing all your stuff, cold, wet, and to shoot 2 Drake Mallards and you're done. I remember those days.
Really?
And now we have these, oh yeah, in the early 90s, now we have,
point system.
Big bag limits, and we have huge bag limits on ducks comparatively. And I mean, well, that's because some of this happened. So that's the kicker in it. If states step up and do things like this, they got to put the habitat in. They got to show that this isn't just unfortunately in today's day and age, a lot of organizations and different companies out there, they'd drum up more money, and unfortunately 90% of it would be overhead costs or some crap like that, administrative costs, right? This needs to be real. If you're going to collect more money from hunters, it better be going into habitat. It better be noticeable. And waterfowl people did it. Waterfowlers were the case in point of the squeaky wheel getting the grease. They started griping and whining. Good for them. And they started putting their money where their mouth was, and state and government agencies, waterfowl production areas, those things started popping up. And what do you know? We've got more ducks.
Yeah, and to double down on what Kyle said, that article that I referenced earlier said 98% of federal duck stamp revenues goes to habitat. So think about that. I mean, that is, and federal government isn't very efficient.
That might be the only thing federal government does well.
If you're only using 2% for overhead cost and 98% goes to habitat, I mean, that is a huge return on your $25 a year investment in your federal duck stamp. It's a huge return. I mean, so states, if they're going to go that way, like Kyle said, they're going to have to, have some similar model where overhead is low and hunters have a tangible result for the money that they put in.
And even just offering the stamp. I mean, how many people buy a duck stamp to collect them and probably go hunt once? So just having that, I mean, even if you don't have to necessarily buy it adds that element of direct conservation dollars going, hopefully at an unbelievable amount of percentage that the duck stamp does, I guess. I can't believe that the federal government does anything that quite efficient. But
I had to reread that 2 or 3 times to make sure I understood what they were saying. This can't be right. They've got this inverted somehow. But no.
It sure seems like my tax dollars go that way, but we won't go there. So I guess it kind of gives us an opportunity to kind of shift and you guys hunted Kansas last year. Did you have a good season down there?
Oh yeah. Yep. I went, I guess we went on separate trips, and then we went on a trip together, but yeah, had real good bird populations. Where I was at, Frank's going to have a little different story for his family trip, but yeah, where I went, pretty far west, a hunt south of where you were, Brian. I know that you go to the kind of the more northwest. My brother used to live out around Norton, but anyway.
Yeah, I actually, I'm willing to say it. Everybody knows about Norton. I spent 7 nights in Norton this January.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's big country out there. When I go hunt, I'll go to Hayes, but I'll hunt 3 different counties. So
well, we stay in Hayes when we go to our normal trip.
There you go.
And most of that land, we luckily got a connection for private land, and it's when you go in January, it is really amazing to see how many coveys are on private land versus the weehawk. But
yeah, that's right.
It makes me feel good that there's good quail numbers. That's for certain. But
pretty good quail, not great pheasants out there where I go, but pretty good quail numbers.
I was surprised. I'm sorry to interject here, but I had hunted out at Hayes for a number of years, and I'm kind of an explorer. I gotta kick new dirt, and I love the adventure of it. And so I stayed out at Norton, and I traveled quite a bit around. I hunted the counties all around there, and I was really surprised how quick that quail habitat drops off to the west from Norton County. I mean, it's just poof, and it is flat all the way to Colorado, and there's no hedgerows. And I swear they're like 4-section farms instead of section.
Yep.
So anyways, Frank, you
my family and I, or my family longer than me, or my father, we've been going to South Central Kansas. So this is Edwards and Kiowa County, sort of west of Pratt in there. And historically, it's sort of on the northern edge of the Red Hills and sort of in the sand hills of the Arkansas River Valley. So quail populations have always been good. And pheasants, kind of up and down, but in general, pretty good. We struggled this year with pheasants, to be honest with you. We really had a tough time, and I think there was a couple of different. Well, there's 2 main reasons. One is just because of commodity prices, we've lost, and I counted it up, we've lost over 80% of the grass that we used to hunt has been turned into crops now. And so that's going to reduce your overall pheasant numbers, plus the number of acres that you have to walk. And in our part of the area, there was a lot of CRP ground that was released to emergency hay and grazing because of the drought. And then so of the 20 to 30% of grass that we had left to hunt, about 60 to 70% of that was either hayed, so there was no cover, or they had currently cattle out there, which made it difficult to want to hunt those spots because the cattle can be pretty flighty then. So we faced some really tough conditions, but just from habitat changes, and then I think localized populations were down there for whatever reason. So we killed some quail, we killed a few pheasants, but it wasn't to the standards that we normally have. But then Kyle and I had a really good quail hunt together later on, so that that sort of made up for it. And that's just the vagaries of upland game birds, and the ephemeral nature of the habitat sometimes is, you can't always expect it from one year to the next to go and if you have a killer year one year, you can't expect it to be killer the next. It may be good, or it may fall on its face, but that's part of it.
Well, it's part of the adventure, and that's why I kind of taken to upland hunting so much, because it's a public land sport in a sense. You need big land. And with that, you typically have to travel. And so it just kind of turns into an adventure every time at least I end up going out and pheasant hunting or quail hunting or grouse hunting. It's it's more than just going to a tree stand and sitting there and waiting for something to come in. It's
absolutely
seeking out. It's seeking the birds. It's putting it's applying wisdom of what you've learned hunting over the years and scratching out a good hunt. And it's not always great, and things change. I mean, even the areas that I've hunted up in like Phillips County, I was amazed to see how much crop got put in this year. There were ditches that we've hunted, for 2 years now that were completely gone. And, another area we went, there was a whole property that had milo, and there was no feed around at all. And it was all Phragmites. And I mean, and I was surprised to see the how fast that had grown in there. And I don't know, I assume that they just put it into CRP, and it was just kind of it was a really nice piece of property that unfortunately is probably not worth hunting too much anymore, at least at its current trajectory for now. But that all could change next season with the spring rains and what happens with the farming practices, or at least how they plan it. So you just got to put your boots on the ground as best as you can. You're looking. I've going to Kansas, I've had to put together a few things and learn, and I, might as well touch on it because I heard you guys on another podcast, and we had some technical difficulties earlier, so conversation we might as well reinvigorate that part. But putting together the right recipe out in Kansas takes that knowledge base, and it's tough for a northern guy like me to put it together. And I don't know, Kyle, if you want to take a little bit of this and kind of maybe give your 2-minute spiel on what guys are looking for when it comes to Kansas and even parts of Missouri to put together a good hunt for quail.
You bet. So it goes back to the same, same habitat components. You've got to have the shrubby cover. That's the first thing I'm looking for. And then you need that structural diversity. So I'm looking for some grass composition, and I would prefer some weed forb component as well. Now, when you get out in Kansas, if you add a ag field, that's fine too. Quail obviously will use ag. So if you can put those three things together in close proximity, you're probably going to have a covey of quail there. So there's a lot of weehaw stuff in Kansas that is not good for quail. There's weehaw, that walk-in hunting area stuff that's, really pheasant focused. I'll drive by right by a lot of that. I like shooting pheasants, but
and even though I gotta say some of that weehaw stuff too, I swear for half of it I drive by it. It's great to have, but it doesn't have all the components to it, and sometimes it has zero. I mean, it really does. And it's unfortunate that, people are paying for that, but hey, I'd rather have it than not. Because it is about, the vastness and having all of that habitat diversity there.
Yeah. And you got to keep in mind, some of that, you're going to drive by some of it and it's a giant green wheat field. And you're like, why are they paying for this? Well, somebody probably goose hunted over that. Like, it has a purpose. It just may not be what we're after.
Well, and even if they're paying for that one, it's not necessarily that the direct dollars for that piece of property are going to excellent use, but the piece down the road, maybe that is what secured the deal because the farmer had both. And
that's right.
It all shakes out in the end, and it doesn't come down to the piece of property and how much dollar it pays. It comes out to having all of the opportunity, and you just have to find the right habitat.
Yep. It's important too. People are going to find, and now you've said you've gone to Kansas several years. You got to take that weehaw map, and every year you go, you're going to build on it. And one really important thing, and Frank just alluded to it, and I've had these experiences, and I know you have too, Brian, is you can't rely on, these are my 3 places, and I hunt the same 3 places every day for 5 days straight. That doesn't work. But you can't rely on the same 3, 6, 8 places year to year either. You better always be looking you hunt your stuff, but you better be looking for new pieces, because every year you're going to have a couple spots that were good that now have not been enrolled in WEHA or have been turned under and turned into some crop. There's going to be some things fall through. So you're looking for those, key habitat components, and you hunt them, you got to put some boots on the ground. I want those key habitat components to be way off the road. I want to have to, if I've got to walk a quarter mile to get back to one plum thicket on the back corner, most people aren't going to do that. And I know there's going to be a covey of quail there, and I'll walk all the way back there to hunt that one thicket and then walk out of there. Those kind of places is what Frank and I are looking for lots of times. But you need a long list so that when you show up and you say, well, crap, they released them for haying because of drought, you're not out of spots. You say, well, hey, I've got, I've been coming for 5 years, and every year I add 5 new spots to this map that are worth hunting. So it's important to keep a list going, but it's also important. Repetition helps. You only get better every year you go. You get more refined.
I agree. Yeah, it's one of those things. I found Onyx. I don't know if you guys use it. Not sponsored by them, but hey, shout out to Onyx. They've helped me be a better hunter. And the notes feature and some of the things that when I went the first time in December this past season, I was able to put together what was successful there and apply it to a whole new area. And I spent some time on the computer, and I had my high percentage, my medium percentage, and my low percentage spots marked. And every piece that I could drive by, I drove by. And I went out of my way to do it, because even if I didn't put dogs on the ground that day, I got an opportunity to drive by these pieces of property and get a lay of the land, because I think those quail too, they really do correlate to those riparian corridors. And some of the WEHA stuff, it's out a ways, and it's not, it's more cattle pasture. It doesn't have all the right components, and it may look good from the map. It might even look good from Google, but until you drive by it and go, well, yeah, I guess I read the topography map wrong, and I didn't, there's boots on the ground cannot replace anything that you can do on a computer. And it's so important, I think, to when you're putting together a trip like that, you've got your spots that you're going to go hunt, and that's great. But you have to leave a part of the day for exploring and finding new spots, because birds move, habitat changes, and water hits one county, it doesn't hit the next county. All those things play into it, and it's about taking all the variables that are around and trying to put them together to have a good hunt.
Yep, absolutely.
I don't know, Frank.
And that can be said for anywhere you go.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that can be said for anywhere you go. And if we want to,
in any game.
Move into, in any game, if we want to move into our Arizona hunt, and I'll just kind of
I'd love to hear about it, man.
Lead into it with that is Kyle and I, and my dad went with us. We spent, we hunted as many possible hours as we could, but we had a lot of truck time driving to a spot and, thinking, oh, we're going to go look at this particular spot, and then get there like, this has been grazed down to nothing. And we back out of there, it may take 15 minutes, 2 truck to drive in there, and oh, this looks terrible. And then you back out. But that's part of it. You've got to get out there and look at those things. And so Kyle and I, we have been wanting to do the Southwest quail thing for a long time. And if we could put together a Gamble's quail hunt with a scaled quail hunt.
Was Gamble's the one that you guys wanted to really chase, or was it all three?
All three, and Merns. If we could knock it out in one hunt, that would have been that would have been it. But those 3 species, even though they live, 2 of them live mixed together in the same covey sometimes, and the Merns, lives really close. They have different ecological niches, and certain weather patterns favor one species over another. So, for instance, winter rain. So they have 2 different rain patterns in the desert Southwest. They have a winter monsoon and then a summer monsoon. And so they get half of the rain in the winter approximately, and then approximately half of the moisture in the summer. And if the winter monsoons are really good, then Gambel's quail do really well. There's a lot of, from what we kind of understand, it's a vitamin A thing. It's available in the desert plants that really bloom after winter rains. Well, blue quail or scaled quail and Mearns quail, on the other hand, do well with the abundant summer monsoons. And so rarely do those match up where you have great winter monsoons and great summer monsoons. So the last couple of years, the winter rains have been very good there. And so Gambel's quail really kind of blew up. And the word was, hey, if you want to come to Arizona and hunt Gambel's, this is the year to go. By the way, blue quail didn't do great. You could probably find some. And Mearns quail are at low levels too. You could probably kick around and find some. But so we had the idea that we were going to try to kill all three if we could, and we gave it a shot. But really, Gambel's is what we focused on because we knew that this was going to be the year based on the rainfall patterns. And so we went out, and there you can do a whole podcast. And one of the things that Kyle and I have written some stuff on is and are going to, and we really like to push is how to do your homework for an out-of-state upland bird hunt. There's a lot of resources for folks to get online to put together a big,
just to talk about that sometime.
We would love that, because you can go online and find all kinds of even for hire services to plan your big game hunt, right? But how does an eastern hunter go to Arizona? Where do you start? I mean, what do you even do? There's not a lot of resources out there. I mean, and if you dig around, there is, but we used our resources looking at weather patterns in terms of rainfall amounts on weather gauges, talking to local biologists, talking to some contacts that we've met through social media, put together what we thought was a really fantastic Gambel's quail hunt when it was all said and done.
And we got the blue quail killed. We killed some of them each day too. So we got 2 of the 3. We just had to punt on the Mearns.
I'm looking at your photo on Instagram right now. I mean, those smiles that, and that pile of birds, man. I mean, I would call that a success.
Yeah. For stuff that hunting in country we've never seen, hunting birds we've never seen, we were pretty happy by the second day.
And it's funny because Gambel's quail are, they're quail and so are scaled quail, but they looked at really nothing like Bob White, in terms of hunting them, as far as, those birds out there are runners.
They're big runners from what I understand.
Yeah. And I can't remember. I know Kyle got into one covey flush where he did really well on the flush, but I don't remember very many times where we got shots on the initial flush. It was always on the, hey, mark these birds down, let's hustle over there, and then let's hunt up the singles. And sometimes it was 2 covey flushes before we got singles pinned down. But once we did, it was some pretty good hunting.
Are you guys double barrel guys, or you carry semi-automatics? What's your shotgun preference? And the reason I'm asking is I got a question after that.
No, we're not purists. We're semi-auto guys.
Oh yeah.
Okay, right
semi-auto.
on. So I'm I don't know. I got turned on to side-by-sides a couple of years ago, and I just love it. It's a preference thing. It's like what car you drive. I could care less. But the reason I ask is because I've heard, at least from talking to some people about desert birds and specifically Gambel's and scaled, is that sometimes you take a shot at a ground bird to get the covey flush because they run so much. And a lot of the guys down there, they're being a purist and a northerner where, you want to shoot a grouse on a wing. Going about it, trying to kick these birds up is difficult. And this, I guess some of the guys in New Mexico that I've heard, they'll take a shot and they're thankful for their semi-automatic because they've got 3 shots.
Yep.
Because they could get the covey rise after that. Did you guys kind of experience that was a challenge for you? Obviously running birds and being used to, covey rises on bobwhite that are, I'm amazed at how tight 25 birds can sit at your ankles and you can't see them or hear them. But so it's a completely different thing from what I understand. I'm just kind of curious how that played out for you guys.
It'll make you, if you go do the Arizona deal, it'll make you appreciate the gentleman bob, because these birds don't play fair at all. I mean, there's times dogs are birdie. We figured out, you just start looking up. I'm talking 7,500 yards. And you're like, yep, I see him. I got him. The covey's running 100 yards ahead of you. You're like, this is ridiculous.
That's crazy.
So yeah. And honestly, so we don't have dogs that are broke to wing and shot, which is fine. And it was a good, because we would start hustling, hoping the dogs would see the birds running, because then the dogs would just take off and blow up the covey, and get them to scatter. Otherwise, you're trying to run through the desert to get the dang things to fly. You're so far, you can't even take a ground shot most of the time because they're running that far ahead of you. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm not the purist with dogs. I want a functional hunting dog, a dog that, again, a guy from Rough Grouse. I loved his comment about this too. A dog that is good for you and doesn't ruin my hunt is a great dog.
Yep.
and
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, like driving what kind of car you want to drive. I think I seen you guys got short hairs, right? Or a short hair in the mix.
Yeah. A little of everything. Short hair. He's got a setter and a short hair. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. My best hunting buddy, he's got a setter, and I've got short hairs. I just kind of fell into him. But yeah, there's my older dog. She does really good in pheasant cover because she can't see the birds, and so she has to rely on her nose. I'll tell you, you get her in on November grouse woods sometimes, and it's like, girl, stop chasing so much.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of guys like to see their dog be the NAVDA champion and all that, but at the end of the day, as long as the dog's getting you out hunting and you're having fun with it, it's all that matters.
Yeah. And to kind of circle back on that line of thinking, while we did have a lot of those, hey, there they are 75 yards ahead. I mean, we had some golden hour shoots that were the birds fanned out in the cover. And we figured out really quick that you needed to have some kind of grass component to get them to stick. If it was just wide open desert with not a lot of grass for whatever reason, whether it was overgrazed or whatever, and we really struggled to get singles. But if there was some grass component where they could scatter out, we had some bird at the end of the nose type deal where you had to kick them out and wait a couple of beats to shoot, that type of thing. We had some really good shooting. So they are sporting, I don't want to give the idea that they're not sporting. Once you get them scattered, they are a ton of fun for a guy and a bird dog. And it's a little difficult because the humidity is so low out there that we tended to do better early, and then late when humidity kind of recovered a little bit. But as long as if we kind of had the wind in our favor and worked slow, we had some pretty good dog work.
It's good to hear. I've heard kind of similar. It's more so the scale quail than the gambles. The gambles cooperates a sense slightly better. Did you guys see that?
Well, part of that's covey size, I would say. So, yeah. So, I mean, these scaled quail, of course, they were down a little bit, but I mean, a lot of those coveys are only 7 to 10 birds. These gambles quail are anywhere from 20 to 100 in a covey. Yeah. So there's a lot of stink coming off a 40 bird covey.
Yeah, that drives any dog just about nuts.
Yeah. So I think that's probably the main factor.
Well, I appreciate you guys sharing. It's kind of getting me pumped up for thinking about trying to make a run at a little bit of desert birds this year. We'll see if I can put it together.
So back on, now that you mention it, after we left, there was a significant snow storm out there that covered much of Arizona. So I guess what I'm saying is I've been sort of looking at Arizona weather, and from what I can see they've been having some moisture. So with as many carryover gambles as there were left, if the weather did pan out such that production was even average, next fall and winter can be just off the charts potentially. So it'd certainly be worth keeping up with what's going on with gambles, because if they even have an average hatch, Kyle, I mean, based on what we saw, it's got to be good next year. Yeah.
Well, and Brian, something I want to mention too. I listened to your other podcasts, and you were talking to a guy. You guys mentioned about, I don't know about Arizona. I think he said, hunting in that kind of temperature and rattlesnakes. And man, you go in January. I mean, we were out there mid-January. Heck, I mean, it gets cold in the desert. Yeah. Now, we hit it right, but the highs were 50s. I mean, we had one day that was in the 60s. The lows were around freezing in the morning. We had a couple mornings below freezing, so it's really not bad. And we were clear down on the border. I mean, I shot a bird that I was 400 yards from Trump's wall and shot a bird. So, and the snakes are pretty much holed up by then. So
yeah, snakes have, they're a concern, but not, I go down to Kansas and even in December, and I don't even think twice about it.
No.
It's I'm more worried about, I think, running into, porcupine or something. Honestly.
Yeah. That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. I've been blessed not to have that incident happen to me yet. And I know it's my days are numbered, especially with one of my girls. She will not stand there and point porcupine. I know her too well. But so, yeah, I'm going to be watching weather here too, because I've kind of heard some of the same things. That the winter months down in Arizona look to be good, and the numbers were really good from last year. And if that sustains, it could be, the Gamble's quail could be really good. So we'll just have to see what the summer months do. I mean, if you get summer rain, I'm going for sure. My wife might not like it, but she'll get over it, hopefully.
Oh yeah. Our wives have learned to I don't know if they've gotten over it, but we've got understandings, and and one of the things Kyle and I talk about, and this year we did a very poor job of scheduling, sitting down with our wives with our hunting calendar and ahead of, long enough ahead so that they understand what's up. And
I think scheduling in general went that way in 2020.
It nearly jeopardized our Kansas hunt, but we've pulled it off. So
real quickly, I'm holding you guys kind of late here, and we've gone longer than I expected. I'm enjoying the heck out of the conversation. It's been fun.
Yeah.
But you guys hit recently, I don't know if it was last season or the year before, I think, sage grouse was just on my bucket list as well. Fill me in. I think, Kyle, you kind of talked a lot about Arizona. Frank, you gonna give me the spiel on how sage grouse hunting went?
Yeah, so sage grouse has been on our bucket list too. And I had the opportunity in 2006 to hunt them in Montana, northern Montana, and killed some up there, but I know Kyle had never had, so we really wanted to get it.
I messed up your guys' names. I'm sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. And I'll let Kyle. But basically, it's the same story. We had it on our bucket list to do, especially Kyle, because he hadn't done it, and then we wanted to do it, have a hunt together for him. So Kyle filled it in.
Yeah, sorry, Kyle, man.
No, you're fine. I heard that you were thinking about Montana, which is good too, and you can get into sharp tails.
Hey, I'm not beholden on Montana. My wife likes Montana.
Yeah.
But we love Wyoming too. So
Yep.
either I'm interested to hear about either.
So we did our research, and of course, as biologists, we're looking at, some scientific papers and where they're researching animals. Typically, it's either because they're about gone or because there's a crap load of them. There's ways to figure those kind of things out. Talk to biologists. Anyway, kind of eastern Wyoming is pretty much the best sage grouse population left in the world. So we decided, well, let's hunt there.
So
that makes a lot of sense.
Real quickly, if a guy wanted to go kill a sage grouse, you're saying Montana or Wyoming might be a better opportunity to at least look at than Montana?
That's what the numbers told us. Would you agree with that, Frank?
Yeah,
I mean, that's
yeah.
what
If that's all I wanted to do was shoot a sage grouse, I would go to Wyoming. Yeah.
Fair enough.
So then we got some intel about, it's just tens of thousands of acres of sage, right? So you're like, how do you needle in a haystack? What do you do? And so we got some insights. You hunt these little seeps. You hunt these, what we would call a drainage around here, just these low swales. And guess what? They're a little more moisture, so they have some greens in them. They also have some forbs that attract insects. So the season's late September.
So all the same components, you're
all the same components.
I hate to steal your thunder or maybe thought process, but
no
bugs. I keep hearing you say bugs, and every time I hear about, especially the native species in North America, how important bugs are to it. But I had to interject with that. So anyways.
No. So, I mean, that was the key. Now, if you wanted to shoot a big bomb or a big male to mount or something, they'll be more out in the wide open sage. But in the fall, these family groups, the hens and the young hang out by these seeps. First thing in the morning, they're in them. I mean, in the bottom of a little swale, and then they'll move out a little bit. So we just started hunting these seeps, and it didn't take long. We found some birds, killed some and found some more for the next day, and went up in the mountains and messed around with some blue grouse, and were able to check that off our list as well.
How was that?
But tough there. We were on the very edge of the blue grouse range. So, but we found some, and we each were able to check it off the list. That's about as far as we can say. We certainly didn't slaughter.
Did you go east or west for those blue grouse?
No. I mean, we were.
There's only just places, Black Hills.
Yeah. Oh no. I mean, we were still in Wyoming.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there's a little bit of the Black Hills in Wyoming. So.
Yeah. We were in the very eastern edge of the Rocky Mountain. I guess we were in the Laramie Mountains.
Laramie Hills, yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know if the Duskies or blue grouse exist in the Black Hills. I was just kind of curious if you went east or west.
Yeah. But the sage grouse, I mean, it became easy once we figured it out. Easy. Now, the Simpson folks, on that note, we talk about everything can change, right? I've told some guys I know here, some local guys who are wanting to do the sage grouse deal. And I'm like, hey, I got this figured out. Here it is. I'll tell you exactly where to go. I'm talking about you can kill your 2 sage grouse in, no time, couple hours. And well, there was a massive snowstorm this year over Labor Day weekend. So 3 weeks before they go. Well, when sage grouse get snowstorms, they'll actually migrate like miles and miles and miles. So
yeah, like not like a short distance that a bobwhite covey would go. I mean, you're talking
no,
close to an elk range.
Yes. Moved to a whole nother county or two.
Yeah.
And so these guys ended up killing birds, but it was like hunt all day and hope they each kill one kind of deal. So it went from what Frank and I found to be super easy. Just one snowstorm changed everything. And it was just because those grouse moved. They went to their wintering grounds
variables,
early.
Man. I mean, and that's one of the biggest things I've found being successful in the field and in the woods with any game is the variables matter. They
Yeah.
absolutely matter. One snowstorm. What a difference.
Yeah. Well, and you need to understand the biology of what you're after, right? You
Yep.
need to understand bluegrass. Here's a perfect example. I mean, who would guess they're a reverse migrator? They start at the base of the mountains in September, and as the season progresses, they go up the mountain when everything else starts at the top of the mountain and comes down throughout the winter.
If you didn't reference that, I would have never known that.
Yeah, so you need to understand those things, or else you spend a lot of time walking around not having much success, and that gets frustrating. So it's important to know what you're hunting and what its habits are and what its needs are.
Yeah, well, we might have to talk off air about Wyoming. You guys got any plans to do any, big hunts like that this year, or anything in the works you want to do?
Yeah, we gotta.
Everybody's got a list.
We got a Utah wild chucker hunt. We got a guy we know to. Yeah. Now I don't know that we're physically capable, but we're gonna try. This guy runs in the mountains 13 miles at a time. So I have a feeling we may be hospitalized before it's over.
Yeah.
But
So what did he say? He say that we could maybe only last 3 days. That's it.
Yeah. He said 3 days max. He said, I'll take you, but you guys won't make it more than 3 days. So okay, we'll do 3 days.
Yeah. So we're trying to figure out what we can add on the way home.
Some flatland species on the way home.
Yeah. So
you guys ever hunted in Colorado?
No.
Yeah, I haven't. My reason I have, my brother, he lives out in the mountains. I go elk hunting out there by him, but I'm in Kansas. I'm kind of halfway there, and I'm always looking for something to pawn him to come out, or coax him to come out of the mountains. And I've never hunted for birds in Colorado, and we tried to kill plenty of duskies during the elk hunts. They scare the crap out of you, and then you go back in there the next day and no dice. From what I understand, it's kind of a tough grouse to hunt.
Yeah, we got frustrated, but again, we were in the edge of the range.
Yeah.
Elk hunters, we saw a whole family group over here, and we'd go in there, couldn't find them.
I was talking to a guy in Montana, and he's like, I usually find them elk hunting and then go back, and it's a different bird, especially for flatlanders. so the chucker hunt. Do you guys know what elevation you're going to be hunting at? Did he tell you at all, or you're going to be up?
Yeah. He, from the stuff that I see from him, he'll send something once in a while, his GPS, picture of his GPS, and his dog's on point, and it's a quarter mile away from him. And I think he's in the 7,000 feet kind of area. So,
well, that it's not going to kill you.
No, it's just hiking up the hills to his dog that's on point a quarter mile away. That's the concern.
I've coming from a rough grouse hunter, quarter mile away concept. It's a hard thing to grasp, and especially when you talk about putting a 10-20% incline in front of you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That seems really cool. Well, I really appreciate you guys holding on the line here late tonight and doing this podcast. I've had a lot of fun chatting with you guys, and I'm going to give you right now open invitation. If you make it up to Wisconsin or Minnesota, I'd love to show you guys a good time. So,
oh yeah, we would love that.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Appreciate you having us on.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks for having us. We'd love to talk about birds.
Well, and I'd love to have you guys back. I think we struck a couple chords that I think probably worth a whole podcast. So I definitely would love to have you guys back and just to talk about your chucker hunt. When it's done. When are you guys going?
December. We're hoping.
Yeah. Okay.
Mid-December. Yep.
Well, we might have another topic to talk about before then, but I'll be in touch, and I'll definitely interested to. You guys got a great Instagram page, so I like following. So I'll be following along. Hopefully, I can get good with the content as well.
Yeah. Our shameless plug. Yeah, Upland Flush on Instagram, and then also check out Land and Legacy.
Yeah, if you guys want to say a few
That's
things
the
here.
consult.
Yeah, before we wrap up about what Land and Legacy is, Kyle, Frank, either one of you kind of jump in real quick and give you the opportunity, as long as you want to take it, to explain and see if some of the listeners might be interested in some of your services.
Yeah. So Land and Legacy is a consulting company, land consulting company, at Land and Legacy on the social media sites, and landandlegacy.tv is the website. And it's a unique consulting company in that we take an approach that is an ecosystem approach. We are land consultants. There's four of us. There's two gentlemen that started the company, Matt and Adam, and then they asked us to come on and to bring some of our expertise on board. And we were glad to join them because they have an ecosystem approach. So instead of rolling onto somebody's property and prescribing a bunch of food plots, we take a look at the property and the surrounding landscape and get down to basics and talk about what these native landscapes were like historically, what these native species that we're interested in managing for, quail, turkey, deer, whatever it may be, what they need from a basic biological level, and how can we sustain them 365 days a year and not just coming at it without a food plot approach. And it's a really unique setup. So that's what Kyle can add some more to it.
Oh, that sums it up pretty well. I mean, they, try to work with the land, what it needs. Fire dependent landscapes, we try to get people to reintroduce fire, and we look at aspect and slope and everything, what was this historically? What habitat types are we dealing with? Just quit trying to, so many things are marketed these days towards, you got to do this, you got to do that. And well, if that's not what that piece of land wants to be or should be, you're just fighting an uphill battle. So we work with what the land can offer and try to help manage it. So pretty cool gig.
Yeah, so they can, reach out to you guys at, what is it, landandlegacy.tv?
Yep.
And then obviously Instagram, you guys have the handle Upland Flush. I'll make sure to include all your contact information, links and stuff in the show notes. So,
okay.
Awesome. I really, do you guys, one last question about Land and Legacy and your side project stuff. Do you guys deal with landowners of my size at 32 acres, or, what's your spread of target kind of customers? Do you deal with anybody that has got a chunk of land that's got at least some potential, or, you're focusing on larger landowners?
You name it. There's been consults from anywhere from 30 acres to 30,000 acres. So, the further you go east, the smaller parcels you get into. You go down into Oklahoma and Texas, you start talking 10, 20, 30,000 acres sometimes. So, no, any of that is possible. Obviously, there's limitations in the bird world for what you can do on a smaller acreage, but deer, for sure, there's some, you can make a big difference on huntability and keeping deer on your place, and with managing 30 acres different than the neighbor or doing the right thing. So you bet any size is possible. What,
I don't know if you guys want to share or not, but it is, cost wise, is it, feasible? I mean, you guys deal with people all over the country is what you said. So, would you find your services, fair market value on kind of the, premier side, average? A lot of people don't understand really what a land consultant is. So maybe just a kind of understanding of what kind of cost commitment might a landowner be looking at.
So there's several options, right? So, it can just be a walkthrough, walk around on your property. We make recommendations, verbal recommendations. You take notes. Obviously, that's the cheapest possible alternative. And it depends on where you're at. I mean, if we got to get on an airplane and fly to New York, obviously that raises the cost some,
Sure.
right? So, but that, if it was somewhere within a reasonable driving distance, you can get a walk around thing done for, I don't know, I'm ballparking here, but might be $1,000 or something.
Sure. So,
then, got offer a couple different plans. One's kind of a hybrid plan. So you're going to get the high points, kind of bullet items of things that you need to do. But typically most consults are a full blown plan, which we're talking, that's 25 pages of not just, hey, you need to do these habitat practices. And it comes with maps, of course, but it's why you should do this habitat practice, the reasoning behind it. And this is what you're going to gain. And this is where you need to put this bedding thicket. And this is why. And this is where you need to burn and why. And this is what burning this time of year will get you. Those full blown plans, you depending on the size of the acreage. I mean, you're obviously getting into a few $1,000s when you reach that point, but that's more common of what people are booking.
Sure.
If you're going to do it right.
Well, people pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for a piece of paper
That's
that they
right.
hang on their wall.
Right.
You're making an investment in a piece of land. This is going to pay dividends as well. And again, it comes down to that stewardship. It comes down to, wanting to take ownership in some of these species of concern and do it right, like you said.
Yeah, well, those full-blown plans, the idea is you should be able to hand that. If you sold it tomorrow, you can hand it to the guy you're selling it to, and they ought to be able to follow it. It's not like, oh, well, I don't understand any of this. We got to call these land and legacy people. No, it's a full-blown, here's what this property needs. This is how you do it. Here's even a timeline to implement it. It's a script of how to do it. And with
hugely
four
valuable.
guys that we've spent our lives doing this kind of stuff. So anyway,
like I want to talk to you guys offline. So I'm interested in, I personally understand the value of it. And I just want to make sure, some of the listeners might understand the value as well.
Sure. You bet.
So awesome. Well, I don't need anything else tonight. I really appreciate your time today, guys, and let's stay in touch. I definitely, hook up in Kansas or something along those lines, maybe for a half day one of these years. So I really had a lot of fun. I think we'd have fun in the field together. So
I think so. Well, thanks for having us,
Kyle. Frank,
enjoyed it.
You guys have been great. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
You guys have a nice evening.
All right. Take care, Brian.
Thank you. Bye now.